I want to get into 10 World Series, and it looks like it has arrived. I hope I'll get in a few more before I'm through.
October 1st, 1932, Wrigley Field in Chicago. The stadium is full, but the feeling inside it is heavier than usual. This is Game 3 of the World Series between the New York Yankees and the Chicago Cubs, and everything about the atmosphere feels charged.
The Chicago Cubs all set to go. The New York Yankees warming up.
The Cubs fans are relentless from the start. Every time Babe Ruth moves, every time he adjusts his stance, every time he even looks toward the field, the noise rises. There are boos, whistles, and constant shouting from the stands.
I wish I had time to say something more to you. All I can say is the teams are taking the field, and I'm very sorry you're not all here at the ball game.
Even the Cubs dugout is involved, calling out to him, trying to pull him out of rhythm, trying to break the focus of the most famous player in baseball. And Ruth stands in the middle of it. By this point in his career, he is more than just a player. He is the most recognized athlete in America. He is the reason people fill stadiums. He is the reason baseball has changed into a game built around power and spectacle. So when he steps into the batter's box, the entire stadium shifts its attention. Ruth steps out, adjusts his stance, looks around the field, and takes his time. Then something happens that will be debated for decades. George Herman Ruth Jr. is born on February 6, 1895, in Baltimore, Maryland. His early life is unstable, his family struggles, and the environment he grows up in offers little structure. By the time he is 7 years old, a decision is made that will change his entire path. He is sent to St. Mary's Industrial School for Boys. It is a reform school designed for boys considered difficult or uncontrollable. Life there is strict, disciplined, and highly structured. The days are controlled by routine, wake-up times, meals, labor, and supervised activity. There is little freedom. For many boys, it is a place of punishment. For Ruth, it becomes something more complicated. It is the first time in his life that structure exists consistently around him. Expectations are clear. Rules are enforced. There is order where there was once chaos. And within that structure, he is introduced to baseball. Brother Matthias, who oversees athletics at the school, notices Ruth early. He is physically larger than most of the other boys, stronger, and naturally coordinated. But what stands out mostly is how quickly he learns when given direction. He is taught how to pitch, how to throw, how to field. Baseball becomes part of his daily routine, not a hobby, but a discipline. Over time, something begins to form, not just skill, but identity. A sense that he can do something better than most people around him. There is no audience yet, no fame, no expectation beyond the school. Just repetition, development, structure. And slowly, something begins to take shape inside him that will later define an entire sport. At the time, baseball itself is very different from what it will become. The game is quieter, more controlled, built around strategy rather than spectacle. Teams rely on bunting, base running, and carefully placed hits. Home runs are rare, not because players lack strength, but because the game is not designed for power. The stars of the era reflect that style. Players like Ty Cobb dominate through precision and aggression on the base paths,
And here comes Ty Cobb.
while pitchers like Walter Johnson control games with speed and accuracy. It is a version of baseball built on control, discipline, and restraint. There is no expectation yet for a player to change the game with a single swing. No expectation for spectacle. No sense that the sport itself is about to shift. And far from the major league stadiums, in a structured schoolyard in Baltimore, a young boy is learning the game in a way that does not yet fit the mold of what baseball is. But soon, it will. By 1914, Ruth is ready for professional baseball. He signs with the Baltimore Orioles, a minor league team at the time. It is his first step into organized professional competition. The adjustment is immediate. The game is faster. The players are more experienced. The expectations are higher. But Ruth stands out quickly. Jack Dunn, the manager of the Orioles, sees something in him almost immediately. He recognizes not just ability, but potential that has not yet been fully developed. Ruth is still young, still learning, still unrefined, but his raw talent is undeniable. Within months, his contract is purchased by the Boston Red Sox.
Youth named Ruth. The boy from Baltimore makes big-time baseball via Boston. It's 1914, and a rookie named George Herman Ruth is already drawing crowds and cheers.
At just 19 years old, he enters Major League Baseball. At first, he is used primarily as a pitcher, and in that role, he succeeds. Between 1915 and 1918, Ruth becomes one of the most effective left-handed pitchers in baseball. He helps Boston win multiple championships, including strong World Series performances.
By 1916, he's Boston's leading pitcher and World Series whiz. His hurling record of nearly 30 consecutive scoreless innings in Fall Classics competition still stands.
In 1916, he delivers one of the most dominant pitching stretches in World Series history, setting records for consecutive scoreless innings. At this stage, his identity is clear. He is a pitcher who can dominate games. But something else is beginning to appear. In batting practice and in occasional appearances at the plate, he shows a level of power that is unusual for a pitcher. The ball does not just leave the bat. It travels in a way that draws attention. Gradually, coaches begin to experiment. He is given more opportunities to hit, and the results are impossible to ignore.
Games. But it's his sensational hitting that leads Boston manager Ed Barrow to try Ruth at other positions too, to give him more times at bat. The experiment changes Ruth's whole career. He becomes the slugger. A home run that day, another the next. In 6 days, he's leading the league in hitting.
A shift begins. Slow at first, but irreversible. By 1919, that shift has fully taken hold. Babe Ruth is no longer just a pitcher who can hit. He is becoming something entirely different, a hitter who once pitched. That season, he hits 29 home runs, a number that doesn't just lead the league, but completely separates him from everyone else. At a time when most teams are built around small ball, strategy, and contact hitting, Ruth introduces something that feels almost alien in comparison: pure, uncontrolled power. and people notice immediately. Not just fans, but writers, pitchers, managers, even opposing players. Because when Ruth steps into the batter's box, the game changes shape around him. The atmosphere shifts. There is anticipation before every pitch. Not hope, expectation. And that expectation begins to spread beyond individual games. Crowds start arriving earlier just to see him hit during warm-ups. Entire sections of stadiums fill before the game even begins. Vendors adjust their timing around his at-bats. Everything starts to revolve around the moments when he might swing. Then, at the end of 1919, baseball makes a decision that will alter its entire future.
This kid worth all that money and $20,000 a year? Let's see.
The Boston Red Sox sells Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. At the time, it is seen as a financial transaction, a business decision. But in reality, it becomes one of the most significant turning points in sports history. New York in the 1920s is loud, fast, and expanding in every direction. The skyline is rising higher each year. Streets are crowded from morning to night, and the city feels like it's constantly pushing forward, never slowing down. This is the beginning of what will be called the Roaring '20s. Industry is booming. Money is moving. People are arriving from all over the country and from across the world, drawn to the idea that something bigger is happening here. And at night, the city doesn't stop. Jazz spills out of clubs, lights stay on, crowds gather in places that didn't exist just a few years earlier. There's a sense that rules are loosening, that life is becoming louder, freer. It's a city built on energy. The media presence is stronger. The attention is constant. And instead of being overwhelmed by it, Ruth grows into it.
And the Smiling Sultan of SWAT completing the circuit.
In 1920, his first full season with the Yankees, he hits 54 home runs. That number doesn't just break his previous record, it nearly doubles what most of the league is producing. In 1921, he follows it with 59. These are not just impressive seasons, they are transformative ones. Baseball begins to change around him. Pitchers change how they approach games. Teams rethink strategy. The entire structure of offensive play begins to shift toward power hitting, and Ruth is the center of all of it.
So thousands cheered and thousands more fought to see him play the game.
By the early 1920s, he is no longer just part of baseball. He is shaping it. By the mid-1920s, Babe Ruth has reached a level of fame that extends far beyond sport.
He was the idol of American youth. They worshipped him, and he in turn loved children. They cheered when he banged that apple out of sight. But they also cheered because beyond the realm of baseball, Babe Ruth was big league in life.
In 1923, Yankee Stadium opens in the Bronx. It is larger than any stadium before it, designed to hold the crowds that now follow him wherever he plays. Almost immediately, it becomes known as the house that Ruth built, not because he constructed it, but because he made it necessary. That same year, he leads the Yankees to a championship and is named American League MVP.
Day, April 18th. 100,000 try to get in, although there are only 62,000 seats. Some say the golden age of baseball has begun. There's gold, all right. Total attendance on this day, 74,000, the biggest baseball crowd yet. Standing, kneeling in the aisles, hanging from the rafters. It's a special occasion. The hierarchy of the game is on hand, led by Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis. Over Yankee owner Colonel Jacob Rupert and manager Miller Huggins hangs a question. Can the big guy come back?
But by this point, his impact cannot be measured only in titles or statistics. It is cultural. Ruth's personality becomes as famous as his performance. He lives openly, without restraint. He eats what he wants, drinks socially, stays out late, and does not conform to the strict, controlled image expected of athletes at the time. And yet, none of it diminishes his performance. If anything, it strengthens his connection with the public, because he does not feel distant. He feels human, real, unfiltered. Babe was married to Helen Woodford. For a time, there is an attempt at something steady, a home life that exists separately from the game, something quieter, more contained. They adopt a daughter, Dorothy Ruth, and in those early years, there are moments where that life feels possible. Moments where Ruth is present, engaged, and genuinely connected to the idea of family. But as his career accelerates, that balance becomes harder to hold during his time with the New York Yankees. This move changes everything. The attention grows, the schedule becomes constant, the expectations never switch off, and with that comes distance. Ruth is on the road for long stretches. The lifestyle around him becomes faster, louder, less predictable. Nights are spent in a different world than the one waiting at home. And while he remains connected to his daughter, the structure needed to sustain a stable home life becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. The gap between those two worlds, public and private, begins to widen. By the time his fame reaches its peak in the mid-1920s, that separation is no longer subtle. It is part of his life. Because the version of Babe Ruth the world sees is growing larger every day, and the life around him is struggling to keep pace with it.
Babe goes to Hollywood in 1927, and actress Anna Nielsen helps him into makeup. With cameras grinding, it's a take, as Ruth invites co-star Nielsen into his arms in make-believe romance.
By 1927, he reaches what is widely considered the greatest season in baseball history.
This was 1927, and this was Babe Ruth then. And teaming up with another great slugger known by the formal moniker of George Herman Ruth, Larrapin Lou gave the Yankees one of the most famous 1-2 punches in baseball.
He hits 60 home runs as part of a Yankees team that becomes legendary in its own right. Murderer's Row, a lineup so powerful it overwhelms opponents before the game even begins. But even within that lineup, Ruth remains the focal point. Every swing carries weight. Every at-bat carries anticipation. Every game feels like it might produce something unforgettable.
That was the year the Babe knocked out 60 home runs, and the Yankees won the series.
The legendary Babe Ruth, there's never been another like him.
And over time, something subtle happens. The performances stop being surprising. they start becoming expected.
That's Babe Ruth at his prime. And there's enough of him for everybody.
That shift is what turns Ruth from a great player into a myth.
I've always liked Babe Ruth and Jack Dempsey because they're my idea of real he-men.
Because greatness surprises, but myth confirms what people already believe.
I guess I'll see you in the World Series games then.
Well, I hope so. I guess I'm one of the lucky fellas to be able to get into 10 World Series. And the way I feel now, looks like I'll be in there.
Well, hope you hit a lot of home runs.
Well, I won't predict anything, but I'll sure do my best. I hope all you boys will be out there watching it.
I understand this is your birthday.
Yes, it's my birthday, all right, and I'm getting pretty old, 37 today.
Is that so? Well, you don't look anywhere near that.
Well, no, the wife tells me the same thing, but I'm going down St. Pete now to try to get in trim for a good season. And I hope I can come through and satisfy all the fans as I've done in the past performances.
A scant crowd of 35,000 to 1932 World Series.
The Chicago Cubs all set to go. The New York Yankees warming up.
October 1st, 1932, Game 3 of the World Series at Wrigley Field in Chicago. By now, Babe Ruth is already the biggest name in baseball, but this game carries a different kind of tension. The Yankees are facing the Cubs, and the atmosphere is hostile from the start.
I wish I had time to say something more to you. All I can say is the teams are taking the field, and I'm very sorry you're not all here at the ball game.
The Chicago crowd is loud, aggressive, and fully invested in rattling him. Every move he makes is met with noise. Cheers from some, but mostly jeers, whistles, and constant shouting.
I wanted to get into 10 World Series, and looks like it has arrived. I hope I'll get in a few more before I'm through.
Even the Cubs players join in. From the dugout, they call out to him, trying to break his concentration. It's not subtle, it's deliberate, and it's relentless. When Ruth steps up to the plate in the 5th inning, the situation already feels charged. This isn't just another at-bat in another game. It feels like a confrontation between player and crowd, between expectation and reality. The count builds slowly. Pitch by pitch, the tension increases. Ruth steps out, looks around, takes his time. He's not rushed, and he's not backing down. Then comes the moment that will define everything that follows.
The first pitch ball was a called strike. Well, I thought it was outside and didn't like it very much. So the boys over there would give me this, on you. Well, the second pitch ball was another called strike. Well, I didn't like that one either, so I let it go by.
Ruth makes a gesture. It's brief, but noticeable. He lifts his arm and points outward, toward center field, according to many who were there. Others say he was pointing at the pitcher or reacting to the crowd. Even at the time, there was no agreement on what the gesture meant. But the ambiguity doesn't last long. On the next pitch, Ruth swings. The contact is immediate and unmistakable. The ball jumps off the bat and rises high into the Chicago sky. Outfielders turn and run, but it's clear almost instantly that they won't reach it.
Well, I stepped out of the box, and by that time they were over there going crazy. And then I looked out at center field and I pointed. I said, I'm going to hit the next pitch ball right past the flagpole. Well, the good Lord must have been with me.
The ball clears the fence in deep center field. Home run. And just like that, the story begins to take shape. Very quickly, the narrative locks in. Babe Ruth didn't just hit a home run, he called it. He pointed, predicted, and delivered exactly what he promised. Whether that's exactly what happened becomes almost secondary. What matters is how the moment is remembered. Newspapers pick it up. Fans repeat it. The story spreads, gaining clarity and certainty with each retelling. Over time, doubt fades, and the legend takes hold. The called shot becomes more than a highlight. It becomes the defining image of Babe Ruth.
I would like to say a few words on my favorite topic. That said topic being a gent by the name of George Herman Ruth. What a man. The Babe and I got back to town an hour ago from an all-day fishing trip out on the south shore of the Long Island Sound. Between weekfish, the gang did a lot of reminiscing about the series, and everybody agreed that the high point of the whole works was Babe's homer in the 5th inning of the 3rd game out in Chicago. I've played a lot of baseball, but I have never seen so much nerve on display before. Babe had 2 strikes on him. There were 50,000 Cub fans giving him the old Bronx cheer, and the Cub players were riding him from the field. So what does he do? He stands up there and tells the world that he's going to sock that next one. And not only that, but he tells the world right where he's going to sock it, into the center field stand. A few seconds later, the ball was just where he pointed, in the center field stand. He called his shot and then made it. I ask you, what can you do with a guy like that?
The perfect combination of confidence, performance, and spectacle. It's the kind of moment that doesn't just reflect greatness, it creates it.
You're going to be a good girl when I go away.
Yes, Daddy.
And you're going to pay attention to what the teacher tells you?
Yes, Daddy.
Well, if you don't, you see that big hand.
Babe never forgets his friends. For 1930 charity, he joins Mickey Walker at billiards. The stick in Ruth's hand is cue to start the game. Babe has as much fun making money for others as for himself.
After the 1932 World Series, Ruth remains a dominant figure in baseball, but the trajectory of his career begins to shift. He is no longer the rising force reshaping the game. Instead, he is maintaining a level of greatness that few in history have reached. Maintaining that level, however, proves to be more difficult than achieving it. As the seasons progress, the physical demands of the game begin to take their toll. His performance remains strong, but there are clear signs of change. The consistency that once defined him starts to waver, and the gap between his peak years and his current form become more noticeable. At the same time, the narrative around him begins to change. The legend is already established, and every new performance is measured against what came before. The expectations do not adjust with time.
Babe Ruth signs the epical contract with the president of the Braves, Judge Emil Fuchs, that makes him vice president, player, and assistant manager of the Boston National League baseball team. The former Yankee Sultan is right back where he started 21 years ago, back in Boston. But oh, how different! He aims to play at least 100 games this year, but after he takes off a dozen pounds or so.
They remain fixed at his highest point. By the mid-1930s, it becomes clear that the end of his playing career is approaching.
And I appreciate being with the Boston Club, and I'm going to do all I can to bring him what you want.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm going to like the Boston Club. I've met the fellows a few minutes ago, and they all seem to be lovely chaps. And I'm going to do all my part that I can to try to help the ball club out. I don't say we're going to win any pennants or anything like that, but we're going to try to do our best and let the other fellows know that we're in the league. There's a little tender.
Signing with the Boston Braves would be his last ride.
There were giants in those days, Babe Ruth slammed out his first homer of the year in grand style, playing with the Boston Braves against the Newark Navy. The exhibition drew a cheering throng of his old fans from across the Hudson. Beer and hot dogs were a dime, round steak was 2 bits a pound, no atom bomb to worry about, and Babe Ruth was still the king of swat. Those were the good old days.
In 1935, Ruth plays his final season with the Boston Braves. On May 30th of that year, he appears in his last Major League game, bringing an extraordinary career to a close.
Well, it's nice to be back in New York again, and I'd like to shake hands with everybody. This is the best way I can do it without being there.
He finishes with 714 home runs, a record that will stand for decades. But even as the numbers define his achievements, it is the moments, especially one, that continue to define how he is remembered. As Ruth's illness progresses, the reality of his situation becomes more visible to the public. Reports of his condition begin to appear in newspapers, and fans who have followed him for decades now watch from a distance as his health declines. There is a sense of collective awareness, an understanding that the man who once seemed larger than life is now facing something he cannot overcome. Despite this, he remains connected to the game. He continues to be associated with baseball, continues to be invited to events, and continues to be recognized as one of its defining figures. Even as his physical condition worsens, his presence still carries meaning. The final visit to Yankee Stadium in 1948 becomes especially significant in this context. It is not just a farewell appearance, it is a moment of acknowledgement.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Bambino, the Sultan of SWAT, Babe Ruth.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You know how bad my voice sounds. Well, it feels just as bad. You know this baseball game of ours comes up from the youth. That means the boys. And after you're a boy and grow up to know how to play ball, then you come to the boys you see representing themselves today in your national pastime. The only real game, I think, in the world, baseball. As a rule, some people think if you give them a football or a baseball or something like that, naturally, they're athletes right away. But you can't do that in baseball. You gotta start from way down the bottom when you're 6 or 7 years of age. You can't wait until you're 15 or 16. You gotta let it grow up with you. And if you're successful and you try hard enough, you're bound to come out on top, just like these boys have come to the top now. There's been so many lovely things said about me, and I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to thank everybody. Thank you.
Players, fans, and officials all understand what it represents. There is no performance, no competition, no expectation of anything beyond presence. And yet, the impact is as strong as anything he did during his career. Because in that moment, the focus is no longer on what he accomplished. It is on what he meant.
The country had suffered a tragic loss of one of its most beloved citizens. The Babe, a man with a heart as big as his powerful body, took one last trip down Fifth Avenue. George Herman Ruth had succumbed to cancer at the age of 53.
In the years after his death, Babe Ruth's presence in baseball does not fade. If anything, it becomes stronger. What he created was not just a career or a set of records, but a standard, a way of playing the game that would outlive him and continue to shape it long after he was gone. For decades, his name remains attached to the most important number in baseball, 714 home runs.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's an honor here to present some of my trophies. I got about 1/3 of them here, and I wish you could see them all. I have one in my lap here for 1921. That's just 25 years ago, or it will be pretty soon. I'll show you how it fits. It was made for my head, but I guess my head's got a little larger then. And this is the bat, the exact weight, and the exact length, and everything that goes with it. I'm proud of that bat because it represents the bat I hit my 60 home runs with.
It becomes more than a statistic. It becomes a boundary, a number that feels almost untouchable, a mark that defines what greatness looks like at its highest level. And for a long time, no one comes close. Generations of players pass through the game, each bringing their own style, their own strengths, their own moments. But Ruth's number remains where it is, distant, fixed, almost permanent. Until in 1974, something changes. Hank Aaron steps to the plate in Atlanta, carrying not just his own career, but the weight of history with him. The moment is different from Ruth's era. The game has changed, the world has changed, but the number remains the same.
Hammering Hank Aaron is the RBI leader of the tribe. Hank is battling tooth and nail for the batting crown.
714. And when Aaron hits his 715th home run, he does more than break a record. He crosses a line that has stood for nearly 40 years. It is not just a personal achievement. It is a moment that connects eras. In breaking Ruth's record, Hank Aaron does not replace him. He joins him. The story continues. Decades later, the number is reached again and passed again.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to AT&T Park. Today's game, the San Francisco Giants versus the Washington Nationals.
In 2007, Barry Bonds surpasses that mark, setting a new record and adding another chapter to the same story. Different era, different game, different circumstances. But the connection remains. Every time the record is approached, every time a player moves closer to that number, the comparison returns. Ruth is still part of the conversation, still the reference point, still the origin of what that achievement represents. And that is what defines his legacy. Not just what he did, but how long what he did continued to matter. Babe Ruth did not just dominate his time. He shaped the future of the game. He changed how baseball was played, how it was watched, how it was understood. And in doing that, he became something more than a player. He became the beginning of a standard that others would chase for generations. A standard that would be matched, surpassed, redefined, but never disconnected from where it started. Even as the game evolves, even as new players rise and new records are set, the foundation remains. At the center of that foundation is Babe Ruth, not just as a name in history, but as the point where history changed direction.
The Sultan of Swat will forever stand alone as the king of baseball's immortals.